I'm here with Ondi Timoner and Rabbi Rachel Timoner. I'm really excited to have this conversation following Last Flight Home. And this film has had a huge impact on me personally and in general on our audience. I feel that we screened this film. We had the New York premiere back in September, and I feel like everyone who was in that theater that night is forever changed. And this film, I am constantly referencing it, and is one of those important films that reminded me how crucial the communal experience of watching a film together is. And this is a film that, yes, you can see alone, and it'll have a huge impact there. But that communal experience is really profound and unique to this film. And I'd love to start there and understand, like from you having the experience of people seeing it alone and people seeing it in a group, how the responses have been from the audiences, like that comes from those different groups.
Rachel, you want to go first since you were
Sure.
just you had the latest experience?
Yeah, we just had a screening. I'm here in LA right now, and we just had a screening yesterday. And because the film is so much, it's so emotional, and it's also so it so uplifts the meaning of life. People, they're breathing together, they're crying together. We've had at screenings people holding each other's hands who'd never met. We have people holding each other's hands who have met but aren't usually holding each other's hands. We have people sharing deep truths with each other. In New York, we screened it at my congregation. There were about 500 people in the room. My congregant and friend Lisa Miller, who interviewed us, said that when she watched it alone, she didn't realize that it was funny. And in the room, everyone was there were multiple times where everyone in the room was laughing. And she said, I hadn't realized it was a funny film, but it's obviously really funny. And so it's just a totally different experience with an audience. And it's been so meaningful to share it with audiences, just profound to feel that room and the way that people are touched.
I feel the same. I just came from London where it was there's a train strike, and everybody, so they expected that they'd be half full, and it was 130% full, to the point where we had to pull 20 chairs in from like a adjacent boardroom and break all the fire codes, and no one moves for the Q&A. Nobody leaves ever. Usually there's a huge drop off, especially with the late screening as it was. No one leaves. Everybody wants to be there, wants to process together, and feels deeply like I think what happens is, no matter where you see it, the film transports the audience into the room with us and invites the audience to really be there with us as part of our family. And a sort of a really interesting miracle of film that I've discovered only with this film is that they can be with our family, but also really be experiencing a very personal journey with their own lives and their own families. And that, I think, is what makes the film so powerful for people.
Yeah. It's really amazing how it's such a personal story, but obviously connects to something that 100% of the audience is connected to, and in some ways we can all experience, and rarely get to see this topic actually broached at all through film. So first of all, it's very brave of you to put it out there. Where did this start? Why did you decide to make this into a film? And how did you know this was a topic for a film?
So I didn't know that it was a topic for a film. In fact, I thought it might be highly inappropriate to be filming at all. So what happened was our father went into the hospital quite suddenly with breathing issues to do a COPD in January of 2021. And which sounds like a long time ago, but it's really a year ago, it feel like, or is it two now? Anyway, it was very sudden, and he was suddenly pleading to die, and to have us help him. And I really panicked and felt like, well, David, our brother, discovered that there was this End of Life Option Act, which had been in place only for 3 years or 2 years at that time in California, where dad could actually terminally ill people could choose to a date, but it had to be like 15 days in the future after a waiting period, and after they proved to several doctors that they are of right mind and not being pushed by their family to do it or anything, that they could do a medically assisted death. And so once we found that out, we realized we could help Dad legally to end his own life, which was something that he really suddenly wanted to do. And he had been there for us and suffered so gracefully without ever really complaining for 40 years of being a hemiplegic after an accidental stroke when I was 9 and Rachel was just 11. Our brother was 7. And so he was just such a positive and incredibly powerfully, unconditionally loving force in our life that we had to get behind him and help him. But it was obviously terrifying to think that the rock of our family would be gone in a matter of weeks. And I felt like I needed to film. So I went to a therapist to see whether or not I was trying to mediate my experience, if I was going to hurt my family. And I expected her to tell me it was a terrible idea, but instead she said, if you feel like you should film, you should film. So I called Dad in the hospital and he said, I instinctively know you're on the right track, which is something that Dad would always tell me and Rachel and David. And somebody asked the other day, what role did your father play in you becoming a filmmaker? And I answered, he just would never tell me to do anything but what I ever wanted to do. It was just, he was so supportive. So I don't know if he knew that we were going to make a film. I certainly didn't know. I just set up cameras because I thought, you know what, I've got cameras. I know how to do this, and I know how to do it unobtrusively, and at least we'll have something of Dad left after he's gone. And I've got to make these cameras disappear before my sister shows up from New York, which was, I had a 10-day runway for that. So we really got the process to be like seamless. There was no crew or anything, but we also kind of like tried to hide the cameras, which were obviously there, but we made it so that there was no like process of documenting, and they were very secondary to the process of taking care of Dad. As soon as I set up cameras, Isaac, I felt so much better. I felt like a safety blanket had been wrapped around the room, and that I would never forget Dad's voice or personality, and none of us would ever have to worry about that. And it allowed me to be fully present, actually. So, and in a way, it was the first time documentary filmmaking was really there for me. And then Rachel asked me to make a memorial video shortly after Dad passed for our Zoom reception and Zoom memorial, which was going to be on the 20th. He passed on the 3rd of March, and we had the memorial on the 21st. And I sat down about a week before and I opened the footage to cut together like 5 minutes. Rachel asked for 5 minutes, 5 to 7 minutes, and I couldn't stand up for like a week. I sat there. Dad was like alive in the Avid. He was so funny. He was so wise. And everybody who walked into that room was changed forever. And I kept thinking, this is the most profound footage I've ever seen. And now that I wasn't in shock and I was able to just be there, I noticed all kinds of things I had missed before. And I just kept cutting after that. The memorial video was 32 minutes long. So the memorial turned into a little bit of a film screening, but then I just kept going. And a few months later, like it just kind of, it came through me really fast, the film, like very instinctual.
Well, one of the things that's amazing to me about this film is that it has gotten this universal recognition: Sundance Film Festival, Telluride Film Festival, Paramount Plus, for a small family film. It's gone pretty widespread, hopefully, and continues to go out there. It's of course shortlisted for the Oscars as well, and I'm wondering. I'm going to start with you, Rachel. Where in this process did you feel that this was that you were okay with bringing your personal into the public? I understand that you at first didn't want the recordings and were a little bit more resistant to having this film, but have also come along not only with the film but also in your rabbinic life as a rabbi, have kind of embraced this topic as something that's important to put out there. And I'm wondering where that change came in.
Yeah, it was quite a process for me. Ondi films a lot of things all the time. We're used to being filmed. And when she wanted to have the cameras in the room, I didn't even really want that. It felt like this was something that was not to have on camera. But Dad was good with it. Everybody else was good with it. And I felt like, okay, I'm not going to interfere with that. And then when she realized she needed to make a movie, I really felt like this was not something for the public to see. And what was opposed to it. But our mom had been watching it every single night as it was coming together, and it was incredibly healing for her in her mourning. And so I felt like, well, that is already so valuable. I'm not going to get in the way of that. And then when it was going to be at Sundance, I was really kind of terrified about it. I didn't feel good about it. And I also had a very practical problem, which is that I'm a rabbi, and all movements of Judaism at that time completely banned any kind of assisted death, anything that would hasten death. It's against Jewish law. It's not just against, Orthodox Jewish law. Even the Reform movement at that time was completely opposed. And I'm a Reform rabbi, and so I needed to do a lot of communication before it came out at Sundance. I wrote to my congregation. I wrote something in the foreword. I wrote to the leaders of the Reform movement, saying, here's what happened. Here's why I did this. My father desperately needed to die. There was no doubt in my mind I needed to be there for him. And I think we need to revisit this question as a people. And I thought I might get a lot of criticism. That didn't happen. I did not get any criticism. But also what happened next was I saw it with an audience at Sundance. And the first time I saw it with an audience and saw like everybody's faces covered in tears and everybody's hearts so open, and afterwards people saying like, this touched me so deeply, thank you for this gift, I realized that even though it went against my instincts to share this, that it was actually something that was so meaningful to other people that it was worth it. And that Dad was good with it. I knew Dad was good with it. And so my own concerns just felt really small compared to the impact it was having on people. And then every time we've showed it to an audience since then, I've more and more and more have I felt that way. And now I just very clearly, like whenever asked, I just say like, I was wrong. Ondi was right. I'm really glad that she made this film. And I feel proud of it. I feel proud of her. And I feel grateful to be part of this conversation that it's allowing to happen in the world.
I've been trying to get my brother to say that to me for many, many years.
You have no idea, Isaac. You have no idea. I thank our Father for allowing me the opportunity for Rachel to tell me she was wrong for once in our lives. I feel the same way. I think Rachel said it all. It's been such a blessing to our family, and to just be able to share our Father and to be able to hear and hold space for all of the people who have been so touched by it. I've never made anything in 30 years of making films, and I've really never witnessed anything like this. It's more like I feel like we're carrying around this ball of light. I'll say this: my mother is sort of our dad in film form, and my mother was very sad the other day, and she said, "Well, everything dies, Rachel, doesn't it?" on the family text chain. And Rachel said, "Yes, everything dies, but it changes, but it transforms into something else. Look what Dad turned into."
It's one of the forgotten elements of film, that actually film in some ways is a way to keep things alive. And I mean, it plays a lot with philosophy of memory. But it also has this ability to really capture and remain and evolve in some ways and be reinterpreted, and it's really quite profound. Ondi, I wanted to ask you something for a moment about the structure of the film and how you decided to tell the story, which was something that I noticed. You could have told this as a rise and fall story and made this completely about your father's life. Did you consider that at all? Because instead you decided to focus really on those last few weeks of life, and weave in there a little bit more. How did you come to the decision of the structure?
Thank you for the question. It's a great question, because there's a few aspects to the answer. First of all, the papers you see on his bed are the script that I've written about him. That I've been developing for years and years. It has always been my dream to tell Dad's story. To me, Dad is the most extraordinary human, and his journey, rise and fall and rise again, in my opinion, is really like the greatest story I could ever tell. And it's our life story. But I never expected to make a documentary, because the only archival footage I had were those 15 to 17 minutes that you see in the film. If there's even that many, I haven't counted, but it's not a lot, not enough for a feature. And so my whole career, people were like, well, are you going to tell your dad's story? I said, yeah, but I'm going to make a scripted film. It's going to bring him alive. It's going to bring the airline alive, and those years, and the stroke and the impact it had on our family. And I still intend to make that film. That is still my dream, to make that film. But this was about life and death and love and family and the lessons we learned, and a guide. This was an urge I had in the editing room. I started to realize the lessons we learned as a family, and a lot of them thanks to Rachel being a rabbi and coming in with such profound rituals that I was not aware of. And if I hadn't been Jewish in the first place, I would have converted by the end of Shiva. But also just Dad's comfort and courage with this process, his humor, and the way that he affected everyone who came in there. As I went from like daughter to filmmaker, I realized that the edit should really take everyone on the journey that we went on, as much as possible, but also to support an understanding of the brilliance that can exist, and often does, with people who are disabled or elderly, to go from a disembodied voice in the hospital to a helpless elderly man being lowered in diapers into a bed, to then what he says he wants to do to Donald Trump, and what Rachel's reaction, which is hilarious. And that sort of turns the audience around 12 minutes in to, oh my gosh, you know what, this could be really fun. And then it's really Dad's room that we were in. And Dad's room was so full of life and so full of love. And I think that I've spoken to a lot of people now who have lost loved ones, and there's a pure presence in the room. It's a beautiful and sacred space. And it was never a thought to go cut to sit down interviews with like hospice workers or professionals about, medically assisted death or the rights therein, or to go into a whole thing about Dad some more. That all you needed to know was what you know in those 15 minutes of backstory. And otherwise, it's really, I think, everything is there. Everything is there if you just can be with us. And I didn't want to close that world. Like once you hear about Donald Trump, and then you're kind of off to the races, and Dad is saying goodbye to his friends and his first flight attendant and his first pilot. Like, you don't really need to flash back, I don't think. You should feel like you're walking the plank with us, like, or walking on the moon. I don't know there's a few metaphors, because on the one hand, Dad said to me, would you rather know when I'm going to die or get a call in the middle of the night? And I've gotten those calls. I've pulled up to that house with fire trucks outside and Dad's head bleeding, and too many times to count, actually. Or my son pulling him off the floor with the help of a neighbor, So indisputably, the answer and the gift was knowing the day he was going to die. Our kids could come from college and be around his bed and get indispensable wisdom that they'll keep forever. There's so many reasons we could celebrate Dad's life as he approached his death, but it was also like walking a plank. And I wanted the feeling of the edit to be just like, you can't get off this ride. You can't, there's a date we're going towards, and time is running out. And that's how we felt, So it's kind of all those things. I hope that answers it. And we were walking on the moon because we were like, had never been through this. Even Rachel, who's, been with so many people as they're dying, and brought so many beautiful, from the vidui, the deathbed confessional, to tucking Dad in with the dirt, to bathing his body, to speaking so openly about what would happen once he died, and Dad being fine with that. There was so much there, but it was like we were walking on the moon in our parents' living room, because she's never lost a parent either. It was really something, but we discovered these lessons and we loved each other through it, because Mom set us up as the T team. From the moment Dad had that stroke, we became a team, and I felt like we reunited around Dad 40 years later. But now we're like adults, and we could bring all the skills we'd gained in our lifetimes. So yeah.
I feel like there's something I need to say, because we're talking to a Jewish audience here. Do you mind if I just add something in, Isaac?
Please.
So I need to just say that the ban on facilitating the end of life it comes from a beautiful place in Judaism, which is about honoring life and wanting, recognizing that life is a gift from God and that it's not for us to take, and never wanting a situation where we would ever cheapen life. And um, and what's happened now since our dad died is that the reform movement changed their position. They came out with a responsum overturning their position and supporting medical aid in dying. The conservative movement has made a similar kind of responsum. And what's being recognized is that the conditions that were true in the Talmud, in the time of the Talmud, in which a person's death was would happen within a week. Now it can be many years that a person is in a medically supported state of being alive. Like our dad was on oxygen. That he wouldn't have, and many people at the end of their lives are only alive because of medicine that has kept them alive, sometimes for years or decades, when they would like to no longer be alive. And so recognizing the difference there can lead to a conclusion that what it is to honor life is different now. And when a person needs to leave the world and is terminally ill, is going to die soon anyway, that giving them the ability to have some agency in that moment is a way of honoring the gift of life that they've been given. So I just wanted to make sure that people know that some of the movements of Judaism have changed the position, and that also it's not a matter that we take lightly, or that there's some deep things to consider as we consider end of life, and Judaism has a lot of wisdom there, and I think there's a Jewish way to support this.
And it's amazing that you're seeing this as part of a movement, that it's not just, a film that's like entertainment and change, but rather actually there's a mission behind this, and using this film as a tool, as a way to change people's approach to a topic that is, of course, definitely not talked about enough and not explored enough, and possibly also needs to go through some changing. And I feel like this is part of a zeitgeist right now. Anderson Cooper, of course, has his podcasts on the topic of end of life, and it's starting to hit the mainstream. But as my last question, I just want to ask: are there any challenges? Have you had any pushback from the community?
In the Jewish community about this?
Jewish community and the audiences seeing this movie.
I have had a few people just say to me that they, didn't agree or weren't comfortable. Definitely, I know there are people out there, obviously, who aren't comfortable with this and don't feel that Jewish law should change at all. But overall, no. Overall, I have been flooded with messages from people thanking me, telling me the stories of their own loved ones who suffered at the end of their life, how desperately they wished for this ability, how the end of their life was not an honoring of their life, how I've had rabbis write to me in confidence saying, conservative rabbis, even an Orthodox rabbi, saying, thank you for your courage. This is something that is so forbidden in Judaism, and yet we need to have this conversation. No, I've shockingly had no criticism, just people saying thank you. And even people who didn't necessarily agree or don't know what they think about it have said, thank you for raising the question and thank you for your courage.
Wow.
Yeah, and we really hope as a family that the film will help to change the law and make it possible for tens of thousands of terminally ill patients and their families to have the kind of turn that our father had. He was so desperate, and soon as he knew that this could happen, it was like a wind under his sails, or in his sails. He just was lighter, and he had this peace and joy. And we've now talked to several families that the same thing, who were able to, to end their lives this way, or have loved ones end their lives this way. And they just said that their loved one was so happy, actually, that the family was behind them, that they could do this together and consciously. And so, yeah, I think the more that we are able to face the fact that we're all going to die, first of all, as Rachel says, it makes our lives so much richer to understand that they're finite, and to be able to embrace life, death as part of life, But there's 22 states in which it's in front of the state legislature right now in the United States, and it's only a law and a right in 10. So Compassion and Choices is working very much with our film to try to change that.
Beyond just seeing this film and loving this film and sharing this film together, I think it's also about taking action after this film and seeing how you can make a difference and make these end-of-life decisions more accessible.
On our website, there's a whole guide for that on
what is that
Interloper
website?
Films. It's interloperfilms.com. Or if you just say Last Flight Home and you can't remember, you'll end up at the homepage at some point.
I want to thank you both so much for your time. You've brought the sun out here in New York. It looks like it's rising in LA as well, though.
Setting here,
Copenhagen.
It's setting here. It's setting here in Copenhagen.
Sounds like the world. The world is still happening.
Yes, it is.
Thank you so much, and I look forward to people interacting deeply with this film.
Thank you
Isaac,
so much, Isaac.
Thank you.